What's going on, guys? B Flatten here with another new video into the controversial Borderlands series. The reason why I'm calling this controversial is because these are topics that I go through on a daily basis, and also topics that are discussed on a daily basis, not even including myself. So last time we did Borderlands 3 versus Borderlands 2. This time we're doing the Bounty of Blood DLC in Borderlands 3 versus the Tiny Tina's DLC in Borderlands 2. Now, before I get into it, both DLCs and both games are fantastic. I did enjoy them both. I've played them both several times over, with several hours into both as well. So the first part of this discussion is going to be on the Tiny Tina DLC, and then we'll transition into the Bounty of Blood DLC a little bit later on. So the first point to make is that the Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon's Keep was a nostalgic DLC. Tiny Tina as a character mourning over the loss of Roland, and like transitioning into the stages of grief is basically the entirety of the storyline. You could see Tina grieving, you could see her having denial, she's upset, she's sad, she's angry. She goes through all the stages of grief throughout the entirety of the DLC. A very big nostalgic factor. Beforehand, before the Tiny Tina's DLC released, Tiny Tina wasn't a overly loved character, if you can believe it. When Borderlands 2 first launched, there was a kind of like a split factor on Tiny Tina. Like, she was funny, she didn't get a lot of hate, but she wasn't a overly liked character. The reason why is because Tiny Tina was really known for her like intro song that she does, where she sings with the bandit and then blows his head up. That was funny, that was great, it was a good intro. And the only other thing that she was really known for was the flesh stick glitch. Now, for those that don't know what the flesh stick thing was, there was an EXP exploit once upon a time, and what it allowed you to do was it allowed you to kill flesh stick multiple times over at a very quick manner for mass amounts of XP. Since you always killed flesh stick, you would constantly gain EXP for killing him, but you failed the mission, so you can reset it. This was later fixed on in the game. However, it wasn't really fixed. It was more or less just more difficult to obtain. What you would have to do is you would have to have a second controller, or you would have to have a second person with you to do it, to make it easier and faster. So Tiny Tina didn't really have a lot going on for her writing wise. She didn't have a lot going on for her to be loved by the community. And then the Tiny Tina's DLC released, and everyone loves Tina. She was just a staple to the community and the franchise. So the storyline of the DLC was great. It was very D&D like. I want to assume and take a wild guess that if you've played Borderlands before, you've probably heard of or thought about or even played mass amounts of hours of D&D. So this is a big shout to this is a big shout to the audience, and playing the audience to the favor of like familiarity. People are familiar with D&D, and they combined it with the game, and they made jokes about it and stuff like that. It was a big play on that, so it was a good job on them. However, if we took it as gameplay, and if it wasn't a nostalgic DLC, gameplay by itself, it would probably be average at best, and it is not a standalone. It probably wouldn't be able to upload itself, or it probably would not be able to hold any weight or water as a standalone DLC. It was a very nostalgic DLC, as we mentioned earlier. Not a lot of people are wanting to take it at face value for gameplay alone, to separate the two. They kind of just take it as a whole. Not a lot of people are willing to talk about that, though. Number 3 point on this is the Tiny Tina DLC probably hosted the worst enemies, not only in the DLC, but the entirety of Borderlands 2 as a whole. We're talking specifically about the Immortal Skeletons. Whoever thought that Immortal Skeletons was a good idea, please never do game levels or game designs ever again. I respect your line of work, but that was awful. Basically, for those that don't know what the Immortal Skeletons are, if you down these enemies, you don't kill them. You have to remove the sword from their back in order to kill the immortal skeletons. If at any point you go into fight for your life, you can't remove the sword when you're in fight for your life to save yourself. You kind of just watch and, you know, hope for the best. The other ones is the skeleton mage. These things were so unpredictable that they would appear once, they would shoot a little laser beam and like lightning bolt at you, and that was pretty much it. They turn invisible, you can't target them, you can't do anything with them. If you looked at them, they would turn invisible. You would have to be very, very quick timed, you would have to do a lot of damage, or you would have to be Maya and hold them in place and hope for the best for killing them off in a very timely manner. The Handsome Sorcerer made sense as a boss in this because it was derived off of all characters in the game, in the base game. We had appearances from everybody playing different roles. You had like Torg, you had Tina, you had the main characters, you had Ellie, Butt Stallion even. You had characters from the base game playing their parts in the game, as you would in a role-playing sort of scenario. So the Handsome Sorcerer makes sense to be there as the bad guy. However, he didn't make anything unique. There was absolutely nothing unique about the Handsome Sorcerer. He had the exact same pools as the warrior, such as the Volcano, the Impaler, the Leech, the Flacker, the Conference Call, and also had the opportunity to drop Jack's mask. There was nothing unique about him besides that these were a little bit increased higher than the warrior, and they also could appear in multiples. So it was basically just warrior fan service for those that didn't want to go through the hassle of farming the warrior. So nothing too unique there. The raid boss also makes sense, the Dragons of Destruction. There was 4 dragons. It was our first invincible that had a 4-in-1. However, with the classic style raid boss, although that is really cool and it was a unique boss, it was a difficult boss, but there was only a few items that were unique to this boss. There was 3 named ones, and there was also a handful of legendaries or pearls that could appear from them, but they weren't source. You were able to get the Omen, you were able to get the Stinger, and you were able to get the Blockade, none of which provided real endgame content. We're talking UVHM and OP levels. They weren't really viable. They weren't really appearing in a lot of builds. No one really had a craze over them, and yet they dropped from a endgame viable, endgame quality raid boss. It didn't really provide anything of, you know, value. It kind of feels like the Guardian takedown in Borderlands 3. It's a hard-ass challenge, and there's not really a lot of rewards in the end for you. Now we're going to go against Bounty of Blood here. We're going to be saying some things that I liked about Bounty of Blood and some things that I didn't like about Bounty of Blood in a head-to-head sort of style. So we talked about Tiny Tina as being a nostalgic DLC, and we also talked about it not really holding a lot of weight as a standalone. As a standalone, it could probably be a mid-tier, medium at best sort of DLC. As for Bounty of Blood was a completely unique DLC. There were brand new characters everywhere. Every character was a brand new character, ones that we haven't seen returning. There were no returning characters from other previous games in the Handsome Jackpot or in the Love, Guns, and Tentacles DLCs. So this one was very unique. The storyline was good. It had you thinking about Rose a lot, and Rose was kind of the Scarlet sort of character. They were very Scarlet-like, as in, you know, badass character, shows up, betrays you on the spot, has a lot of escape scenes, provides a boss for you in the middle of the chase, and has a lot of plans to cause a lot of problems. Also, the Scarlet and Rose not confirmed dead. That is another thing that really relates to both characters and something that's mutual between them. Enemies were unique. There were flying enemies, there were new named enemies, there was tons of bosses in the DLC, none of which had immunity phases, which was annoying in previous DLCs and even the base game of Borderlands 3. So this was quite the return to roots kind of DLC is the best way I'm going to put it. It really felt like a return to roots kind of DLC that Borderlands provided to us. So the Ruiner as the final boss in the DLC of Bounty of Blood, I have to put minus points on. Although it was a cool fight, and although it had 2 different layers of platforms to fight the boss on, this was not a unique boss to me. It was quite the copy-paste of the Handsome Jack and the Warrior fight in Borderlands 2. It was very similar to how you fought Rose and how the Warrior/Ruiner came later on. It had one unique item, which was the Bloom pistol, and everything else was just items throughout and scattered in the DLC, whether they were sourced off of something or whether they were sourced off of a unique spawn or a unique boss or anything like that. Only one unique drop, and the boss itself wasn't really that exciting. There was no classic raid boss. Tiny Tina's did have a classic style raid boss. The Bounty of Blood DLC did not. However, the entirety of Borderlands 3 doesn't really have the interest or shown interest in a classic style raid boss. They're all kind of hidden behind the takedowns, and then however you want to consider Ista the Invincible is up to you. I don't really think he's a classic style raid boss. It's just he's a boss with the Invincible in his name, and I don't know if I can really minus points for them on that because they want to try something unique. So I'm not so sure about that one. I'll leave that one up to you guys. It was a short DLC. It didn't really have a lot of longevity in it, and it felt like there was some pieces missing for sure. It's considerably easy, but I'm not sure if this was because of the patch that launched with the DLC as well. So that one I'm kind of up in airs about. It could be the patch, it could be the DLC itself. I'm not entirely sure on that. The company at the very start, they did mention the company. We don't really get to know too much about the company. We don't know too much about the talking about the narrator being known as the liar multiple times throughout the DLC. There's a lot of writing potential there, and I discussed a little bit about writing potential in a previous video titled the Butcher Rose Theory, so if you want to see some of my theories on that, that's where you can find them. Yeah, I think that's pretty much going to conclude this video. To me, though, to conclude, I want to say that the Bounty of Blood DLC, it instantly got into my top 5. Like, it instantly got into my top 5 as soon as it launched. I played it a few more times just so that I could really see what it could provide, and, you know, like echoes and things like that. So I've had multiple playthroughs and a lot of time to think about it. With that, it actually jumped up higher on my list. It didn't go from top 5, it went to top 3, and then after a few more playthroughs, I think it's in my top 2 now. So to me, with the constant amount of playthroughs that I went through, the more playthroughs that I went through in the Bounty of Blood DLC, the more that I enjoyed it, and the higher that it went up on my list. So much so that it had me spinning around Butcher Rose. It made me cause to release that video, the Butcher Rose Theory, and it's probably in my top 2 as of right now. It is currently clashing and fighting with the Claptastic Voyage in the pre-sequel, but to me, it beat Tiny Tina's. To me, it defeated Tiny Tina's in terms of DLC. I didn't like a few things about the Tiny Tina DLC. I liked a ton about it, but there was a few too many dislikes in the balance of it. So congratulations, Bounty of Blood, you have won me over. Matt Cox, please direct all DLCs from here on out in the future. I believe in you, and you are doing great things for the Borderlands and its DLCs. I think that's going to conclude the video there, though, guys. Thank you all so much for watching, for stopping by, for listening to both sides and my theories on both DLCs. Really do appreciate it. See you guys in the next video. My name is Beef Latin, and I'm signing on out of here. Take care, guys. Laters.